Hello again, everyone, and thank you so much for joining us for this Monday's edition of Alaska Weather on this 23rd day of March 2020, 4 days into the spring season now. And looking at the hazardous weather graphic, we've got winter storm warnings out here for the North Slope and eastern Beaufort Sea coast tonight and tomorrow as more snow and winds continue. Will blow the new snow around and create visibilities down under half to a quarter mile or even whiteout conditions at times later tonight and for tomorrow. And then for the actually tomorrow night through Wednesday, through 6 p.m. Wednesday, these warnings are out. And winter weather advisories are out for the same length of time here for the southeastern Brooks Range, Arctic Village area, and also for the upper Yukon Valley, Shawkyitzik, Fort Yukon, Beaver, and those locations, Koyukuk Valley, Bettles, and also down into Tanana and the greater Fairbanks area, as well as the upper Tanana Valley, 40-mile country, blowing snow at times, continuing in surges moving through for tonight, tomorrow night into Monday. So look for anywhere from 1 to maybe 5, 6 inches of snow, depending on where you are there, along with occasional gusty winds blowing that around, reducing visibilities down to under half a mile at times. Otherwise, satellite imagery showing moisture continuing to come northward and then moving eastward here as it kind of collides with the Arctic westerlies up there, up through this area, northern part of the, or the North Slope on into the southern Arctic there. And so that's pulling all this moisture eastward with areas of snow. Pretty good snowfall amounts today along the Alaska Range, especially on the north side, with McKinley Park picking up 4 to 6 inches of snow in a 12-hour period ending at 3 p.m. this afternoon. Delta Junction picking up anywhere from 2 to 5 inches of snow, and then lighter amounts, but a persistent light snow the entire day at Fairbanks and Dehne, and areas here, much of the interior, but amounts not quite as heavy. Fort Yukon picking about ½ an inch today, and Eagle Summit had around an inch of snow there northeast of Fairbanks. Otherwise, even Barrow picking up an inch of snow, and Indian Mountain also had about an inch of snow during the daytime today, or from late last night through mid-afternoon today. Otherwise, back to the southwest here, we've got St. Lawrence Island in the clouds, but really conditions aren't too bad there. And warmer air moving northward here. We've got a little bit of light rain trying to get going, or mixed precipitation. Temperatures pushing up near 40 degrees here over the Pribilof Islands with a kind of a persistent southerly flow that is in rain, but light rain, only 1/10 of an inch falling today at the Adak-Atka area. And winds on the increase here over the eastern Aleutians and the Alaska Peninsula toward Cold Bay, with Cold Bay seen as a gradient as this ridge kind of pushes to the east. Enough of a gradient for Cold Bay to see the winds gusting to, well, in Alaska had gusts 25 miles an hour, Cold Bay gusts 35 miles an hour, and Nikolsky gusts to 50 miles an hour here, clean closer to the front. And rain all through this area spreading northward with warmer air, and we have an Arctic boundary kind of meandering north and south here in the central interior that trails back into another system way back just north of the Russian Far East. So again, winds eastern North Slope, eastern Arctic coast, gusting anywhere from 35 to 40, maybe even 45 miles an hour in the windier areas there. And also over the southern, or over the Panhandle today, winds generally coming down in Lynn Canal throughout the afternoon, still pretty gusty, still seeing gusts about 50 miles an hour at Lynn Canal. But that offshore northeast wind making for sunshine across the entire area there into the Gulf of Alaska, mostly clear skies, as well as south central Alaska today. Otherwise, we had, well, gusts to 60 miles an hour at Five Finger Lighthouse, or 55 miles an hour there, and Juneau seeing gusts 35 miles an hour out of the northeast. And those winds are going to be trending down tonight, definitely, and you'll see a lot less wind tomorrow, but still sunny skies. And for the forecast for tonight, moisture continues to stream northward here and then again shear off to the east. So we got impulses of snow and gusty winds with these troughs coming eastward from west to east, north of the Alaska Range and affecting all of the northern and northeast interior. The heaviest conditions occurring over the eastern North Slope, eastern Brooks Range area, on up to the eastern Beaufort Sea coast, where those warnings are out. And look for pickup in the winds as that low center tracks eastward. You'll see an increase in the winds tonight on the east side there. Otherwise, dry, light winds, mostly clear. Gulf of Alaska, south central Alaska down to Kodiak, still looking at an offshore flow. We should see your winds trending down there as well, although they won't end completely, but will be lighter. Won't be much of a problem, and it'll actually have to keep your temperatures up from what they would be if they went dead calm. Probably a little cooler tonight over the northern panhandle, a lot less wind, especially in the wind-sheltered areas. It'll definitely be colder than last night, and stays a little breezy over the southern southeast coast. Look for periods of rain for the eastern Aleutians on up into the Pribilof Islands eastward. Chance of rain or snow, mixed precipitation moving into the southwest coast for tonight, and then that backs around all the way to the main low center, which isn't all that impressive, about 1,007 millibars, but small craft advisories in advance of that for the central Aleutians. High pressure builds back in over the northern Bering Sea for light winds and mostly clear skies, St. Lawrence Island into the Bering Strait. And then the forecast for Tuesday, tomorrow. Other Arctic boundary kind of drops in this low, yet another one passes by to the east, so we got the winter storm warnings out up in this area for the snow and blowing snow. Gusty winds 50 miles an hour, less wind, but periods of snow, breezy conditions, still a gradient here. In fact, March kind of a windy month here in the interior, kind of a known windy month here in the interior Alaska, and it's kind of living up to that this month. Otherwise, less wind and still a lot of sunshine, variable mid and high clouds probably for the Copper River Basin, even the North Gulf Coast. Increasing clouds, Cook Inlet, but it looks like at this point in time all the moisture is staying either north or west of the Alaska Range. You can see a bigger influx of moisture here into the southwest interior, mixed precipitation again with the milder air, higher freezing levels. And looks like rain and showers pushing into the Alaska Peninsula. A little bit of a break for the eastern Aleutians. Another trough brings another round of showers. And then that scatters out to the west. High pressure in over the panhandle, sunshine, light winds, and really nice afternoon temperatures. For the day on Wednesday, though, system moves in, so you'll lose the sun, gain the clouds, and chance of showers along the coast. And kind of a break here for south central Alaska is still this west-northwest flow that off the mountains, kind of downsloping, just variable clouds. Maybe some light precipitation tries to get into the northern Susitna Valley, but again, the bulk of it staying west in the Kuskokwim Valley, west of the mountains, and mixed precipitation down into northeast Bristol Bay, snow showers, Yukon Delta, Kuskokwim Delta, ending up toward Norton Sound. Look for partly sunny conditions here over the northwest part of the state. Yet another trough. Snow and blowing snow continues to the eastern Beaufort Sea coast with gusty winds, but additional snowfall amounts won't be all that much, pretty light. And it looks like periods of snow here continue for the 40-mile country down into Nabezna, Tok, Northway, trying to get into the northern Copper River Basin, but we'll have to wait and see. Some rain chances there for the Alaska Peninsula, nothing heavy precipitation-wise, followed by weak high pressure here. Adak and Atka, Kiska, partly sunny skies there. And then a weak front brings a chance of rain, that's about it, into the far western Aleutians. Lows for tonight, shade below zero around the eastern Brooks Range Arctic Village area, otherwise staying above zero with the winds there for the Arctic coast, still in the single numbers, 0 to 5 on the east side. 10 to 20 on the west side, lower 20s here for Kotzebue Sound, North Gulf, or the northwest coast. North Gulf Coast, lows in the 20s tonight, mid to upper, and kind of a range in temperatures depending on who sees the wind and where it goes calm there for the panhandle. 0 to 10 for the Copper River Basin, and should be milder south central Alaska tonight than it was last night. Maybe staying in the 20s most areas, lower 30s Kodiak Island, and in the 30s here over the Aleutians, and mid-30s for the Pribilof Islands. And under that mild southerly flow, highs tomorrow, lower 40s here for the Aleutians, mid-40s on Alaska Dutch Harbor, lower to mid-40s Alaska Peninsula, upper 40s Kodiak Island, maybe pushing near 50. And for the mid to upper 30s, above freezing definitely here again for south central Alaska areas with sunshine, could see lower 40s once again if in areas that have the sun, and then 30s, lower 40s for the panhandle. And mid-30s breaking out over the central interior, but staying generally below freezing. We're in the teens and 20s for the North Slope Brooks Range on out to the Arctic coast, followed by lows back below zero, a little more clearing up here on the Arctic coast and North Slope, so call it 5 to 10, maybe 15 below. mid-20s in the interior, lower to mid. Near freezing here toward the southwest coast, mid to upper 20s south central Alaska, followed by highs in the mid-30s.
And now, aviation weather around Alaska.
Moving on to flying weather. A lot of IFR here for the Bering Sea and the Aleutians. Northward, then taking a turn into the east-northeast, Yukon Delta, in over Norton Sound, south coast of the Seward Peninsula. Marginal VFR from there northward, then some more IFR, central eastern Arctic coast, and along and north of the Alaska Range, or either side there. South of the mountains, we've got VFR from Bristol Bay eastward across Gulf of Alaska, including Kodiak Island, Prince William Sound, all the way down the west coast of North America. And for the Tuesday afternoon forecast, not much change here. We have some lower conditions, mostly on the east side of, or the west side of the mountains here. IFR northward from the Bering Sea across the northwest coast, Brooks Range on up to the eastern Beaufort Sea coast, marginal VFR for the remainder of the North Slope. And holding VFR, Kodiak Island, northeast Bristol Bay, and most of south central Alaska, if not all, eastward, across the Panhandle, other VFR day. Marginal VFR on the increase here over the interior, and then that's followed by IFR trying to increase, kind of oozing eastward here in areas. Northern Sitna Valley, north of the, along and north of the White Mountains, and up to the central Brooks Range, with nothing but massive IFR out into the central and eastern Bering Sea and south side of the Alaska Peninsula, Fox Islands, and marginal VFR cutting off right around Pasagchak or Chiniak, Marmot Bay area, maybe a little south of there, Fognak Island in the clear. IFR band here in the Gulf of Alaska back to Montague Island with marginal right along the southeast coast. And for the afternoon on Wednesday, no more VFR here for southern Alaska. All marginal and IFR, and that extends right on down into the northern Panhandle. The IFR does, with marginal VFR down to Dixon Entrance, and IFR southern Kodiak Island, VFR Fognak Island, and southern Bering Sea, all IFR. Most of the Aleutians, with the exception of Unmak and Unalaska Island, they'll be marginal. St. Lawrence Island, marginal. And some IFR up here for Buckland, and then VFR, Kivalina, Red Dog, maybe Point Hope, but Cape Lisburne across the North Slope, mostly marginal. VFR for the central Arctic coast. And for passes, Anatuvik, marginal, becoming IFR, and Adigan, marginal VFR, trending toward IFR in the afternoon. For the western Alaska Range, VFR becoming IFR here for both Lake Clark and Merrill. And rainy, I think, will be marginal with IFR possible on the western entrance, or becoming more likely into the afternoon. And windy, marginal mostly, and Isabel, IFR becoming marginal, so improvement for Isabel and Mentasta, marginal becoming VFR. And Tanita, good VFR start to finish tomorrow, and same thing for Portage. Ceilings visibility is unlimited there, and for Chilkoot and White, good VFR. Freezing levels showing warmer air trying to push back to the north here, 2,000 feet by tomorrow morning up into northern Cook Inlet, Prince William Sound. Even farther to the north out here, we've got 6,000 feet up to St. Lawrence Island, 8,000 feet here over the southeastern Bering Sea, north of the Aleutians. In fact, 10,000 feet there for the Alaska Peninsula back toward Atka. Icing, none for the southeast coast or south central Alaska, but areas of scattered light to very isolated moderate rime icing here from the Bering Sea northeastward across, well, the northern interior to the Arctic coast. Jet stream, high pressure holding here south of Kodiak. Weak trough right through here, but really kind of ridging right up and across the Bering Sea. I have a big storm there south of Kamchatka. Westerly turn northwesterly here, about 120 knots, diving down just west of the Panhandle, 9,000 feet. Westerly flow through the interior, strongest here, north central interior, about 25 knots, and then again along the Arctic coast, 15 to 20 southern Alaska, 5 to 15 for the Panhandle. Pretty light winds out over the Bering Sea, and the Aleutians, 3,000 feet, same pattern, pretty light winds here, maybe 20 knots across the Barren Islands at 3,000 feet, otherwise no wind at 10 knots for the Panhandle, 10 to 15. Interior, 20 knots, central eastern Arctic coast, and light winds out over the Bering Sea, maybe 20 knots, and that's about it. Turbulence-wise, not much out there. Light to isolated moderate chop, AKwx over 2 on Alaska, and northeast interior. Areas of light to very isolated moderate chop up here, 4,000 to 6,000 feet. And for small aircraft, might be a little bumpy, Kodiak Island.
Good evening, and thanks for joining us for another edition of Alaska Weather Facts. I'm meteorologist Dave Snider, joined again by Eric Stevens of GINA, the Geographic Information Network of Alaska from the University of Alaska Fairbanks. And Eric, thanks so much for joining us again tonight.
Happy to be here, Dave.
Thanks, Eric. And we've been talking about the complex gathering of information from satellites, looking down on the surface of the planet, and some of those orbits around the planet work for Alaska and some of them don't. There's a lot of challenges with those. How can we get better imagery for the poles and specifically for Alaska?
Right. Well, today we're going to talk about a very interesting kind of satellite orbit that has potential to be real helpful for the high latitudes.
Okay.
Especially us here in Alaska. Canadians, Russians, Norwegians will all be interested in this. The satellites are not in orbit yet. Now the future is uncertain, but it's possible, and if this happens, it will be wonderful for Alaska. Okay. It's called the highly elliptical orbit.
Oh, that sounds
it's interesting. Yeah. And I think first, to help our discussion, we should get back to some of Kepler's laws and how do satellites work.
Sure.
Kepler's first law, an orbit of a planet around a sun or a weather satellite around the Earth is not necessarily a circle, it's an ellipse.
Okay.
And the highly elliptical orbit takes advantage of this aspect. We're going to put the Earth in one of the ellipse and then stretch one of the foci of the ellipse and then stretch that ellipse out real far to make it highly elliptical.
The foci is that bend part of the end of the ellipse. If you're going to stretch out a rubber band, that would be the center, kind of the stretchy part.
Yes.
Ends. Okay.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
And then Kepler's second law says that the closer something is to the thing that it's orbiting, the faster it goes.
Okay.
We see this in the solar system, that Mercury flies around the sun real fast. Jupiter, much slower. Jupiter's further away, it's slower. Mercury's closer in, it's faster. This happens with weather satellites too. Even satellites like the International Space Station, it's pretty close to the Earth. It goes around the Earth in only 90 minutes. That thing is moving. It's only 250 miles away. So how can we take advantage of these two aspects of Kepler's laws of motion to get better weather surveillance of Alaska? And this highly elliptical orbit is going to be the approach. So we have with us today our friendly planet Earth and our simulated satellite, the lid off of this salt shaker
like
here.
Sputnik there. Yeah.
Here it is. It's shiny, it's metal, it's space worthy. And what we want to be able to do is, could you have a satellite hover over the top of the world, up over Alaska? You can't really do that. Geostationary satellites have to be over the equator. Okay. So how could we almost solve this? And this is the tricky part. Maybe should we tilt the Earth over?
Focus on the pole. That's what we're trying to accomplish here, right?
So here we have the northern side of the planet, and we're going to trace out the orbit of a satellite with this salt shaker lid here. Now imagine a highly elliptical orbit. So let's put the Earth in one of the foci of the ellipse, and we'll have an imaginary foci out here. So the satellite will not go in a circle around the Earth, but will be in this long strung out ellipse. So the satellite will go...
kind of like a racetrack.
Yes, there you go, like a racetrack. So it's an oval elliptical shape like that. And notice now that when the satellite's over here, we've got a nice view of the northern hemisphere around. There's Alaska, Russia, Canada, Greenland, all there. So that's the ellipse aspect of an orbit, Kepler's first law. The second law saying that when you're further away as a satellite, you go slower. And this we can take real advantage of. Because the way this orbit works, when the satellite goes over Antarctica here, it's going to be close to the Earth. It's going to be moving, whoosh, goes on by. And then as it comes out here, it will slow down. This increases what is known as the dwell time. The satellite will just hang here looking for hours at Alaska and the high Arctic. And then eventually it will come around and it will accelerate and whiz around the South Pole and then come back and hang here for a while because it's further away from the planet. It goes slower. It has to. That's the laws of motion. And such like that, repeating.
Wow.
Now the real important way to make this work is you have to have two satellites. So that while one is whipping around the pole, you've got the other one out here. And they work as a team. You could then get a series of images of Alaska that can be almost from a quasi constant frame of reference.
Right.
And you can loop them together to make movies. You can take a picture every 10 minutes, say, of Alaska and then loop it, playing it at several frames a second. You could see the clouds whiz on by. You know, the Weather Channel, weather broadcasters in the lower 48 especially can show these movie loops from the geostationary satellites. In Alaska, we've never really been able to do that very well, especially in the higher, most northern parts of the state, because those geostationary satellites are over the equator. It's not a good view. And this highly elliptical orbit whipping around the South Pole and then dwelling up here would be a way for us to get that constant frame of reference and do really good weather surveillance over the Arctic, seeing where those storms are, where they're going. Nothing quite like a movie loop of the weather in time to really illustrate what's important, what's going on.
And compared to what we have right now, we just have small windows or snapshots of what's going on with the polar orbiters. We don't have that long range view that's looking top down to give us that complete motion picture that helps us understand so much of the atmosphere at this
There's
point.
so many different kinds of satellites. Each has their advantage. Each is important, and the highly elliptical orbit satellite will also fit into that scheme. It's a nifty idea to solve an Alaskan challenge.
That's fantastic. Well, that sounds really exciting, and again, a kind of a satellite dream of the future to come. Okay, very good. Thanks for joining us today, Eric. We really appreciate the information, and if you'd like to learn more about what Eric does at Dehne, at the University of Alaska Fairbanks, we invite you to visit the web address that you see on your screen there. For Alaska Weather Facts, I'm meteorologist Dave Snider.
And now, marine weather around Alaska.
Welcome back. Looking at today's ice edge, still heading northward here, retreating back, melting away right on down to Bristol Bay, and to a little bit lesser extent up to the northwest here, where the flow is a little more westerly, but still kind of pushing it back to the east a little bit. And no change, definitely no southward movement expected at all here over the next 4 or 5 days, with kind of that weak southerly flow continuing. And for the coastal water forecast, northwest at 20 on the south coast of the Panhandle, see 7 to 8 feet. West-northwest, light 10 knots on the north coast. Lynn Canal, south 15. So not only losing the north wind, going south, variable to south at 15. North 15 for the central southern inside waters, seas 3 to 4 feet there. And then for Wednesday, south winds Clarence Strait at 10, southeast 15, Clarence Strait, south at 10, Stevens Passage, southeast at 15, Lynn Canal, south 20, and westerlies 15 to 20 knots here with 6-foot seas on the south coast, and then light northerlies at 10 knots up on the north coast with 6-foot seas. And for Cook Inlet tomorrow, north winds 10 knots, seas slight, northwest 15 for Kamishak Bay, and small craft advisories here for the Barren Islands, and the western North Gulf Coast for 25-knot winds, seas 7 to 9 feet. Much lighter, though, for the Middleton Island zone, north at 10 with 4-foot seas. Those will swing around to the northeast, both for Prince William Sound, eastern North Gulf Coast, 10 knots with seas 6 feet here out over the ocean. Northwest at 8 knot, or northwest 15, 6-foot seas for the western North Gulf Coast, the Barren Islands, and Kamishak Bay, small craft advisories, northwest 25 knots. Winds stay light in Cook Inlet from the north-northeast, no more than 10 knots. Bristol Bay, variable winds at 10 tomorrow, south 20 knots here for the Alaska Peninsula. And Kodiak Island, east side of the islands, small craft advisories, west winds at 25. Outlook for Wednesday, west winds here, everywhere west winds, 20 knots, Alaska Peninsula, Bristol Bay, and Shelikof Strait, 25 knots, good for small craft advisories, east side of Kodiak Island. And for the Fox Islands tomorrow, southerlies, mostly 25 knots, except the south coast of Unalaska Island will be 20 knots, seas running 6 to 10 feet or 6 to 11 feet. South 25, small craft advisories, Adak and Atka. Really not much of a problem wind-wise there with 8 to 12-foot seas. And then winds dropping off as you head west down to 10 knots from Kiska to Shemya. And those will pick back up with the approach of a weak system out here on Wednesday. Southeast 25 knots, otherwise the central Aleutians, southerlies at about 20 knots, and south to southwest winds 20 to 25 knots here, and mostly west at 25 here on the north side of Unalaska Island. Southwest coast tomorrow, light winds from the south, only 15 knots. Pribilof south at 20, southwest 15, St. Matthew Island and St. Lawrence Island, south at 20, southwest 20, Norton Sound. Those swing around to the northwest. Pretty light wind conditions up here over the northern Bering Sea, and 10-knot winds, west 10 for the Yukon Delta coast, 20 knots, a little brisker there on the Kuskokwim Delta coastline. Pribilof's west 20, north 15, St. Matthew Island. And we got brisk wind advisories for all of the Arctic coast up here, strongest on the east side there with the snow and blowing snow and the winter storm warning out for the next couple of days. 30 knots out of the west from the marine zones there, and Wales to Cape Lisburne, only 15 out of the southwest. And then lighter winds coming up on Wednesday, with the exception of the far eastern Beaufort Sea coast, still holding on to that 30-knot west wind, but down to 15 on the west coast. Then 10-knot winds here for the central coast 15, west coast all the way down to Wales, northwest at 10. And taking a look at tonight's weather again, westerly flow coming over the top of higher pressure here, with the center of which is now down off the map, but still ridging northward here into the southwest interior areas, keeping it dry over south central Alaska, clear Kodiak Island, less wind, clear skies over the Panhandle, and rain, warmer temperatures sliding northward here on the western side of this ridge, keeps it wet over the eastern Aleutians, Pribilof, some of that spilling into the southwest coast. And that'll try to jump the Alaska Range, but it'll have a hard time doing it and probably won't tomorrow. Just see clouds coming into Cook Inlet to sit in the Matanuska Valley, mostly sunny east of there, down the Panhandle, high pressure, light winds, sunshine. And snow blowing snow, eastern Brooks Range, eastern North Slope, and eastern Beaufort Sea coast, gusts 50 miles an hour. Periods of light snow moving from west to east in the interior. And then this whole Arctic boundary drops down on Wednesday, colder to the north and not so cold to the south.
These forecasts are for planning purposes only. Call 1-800-WX-BRIEF for a formal pre-flight briefing. Always file a flight plan before you go flying. The U.S. Coast Guard Auxiliary urges you to leave a float plan with a friend or the harbor master before you go boating.